Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Tyler the Creator album, Igor. Tyler the Creator, California-based MC, really put the game on notice in his early days with his very vicious, very visual, and very controversial lyrics. His 2009 breakout mixtape, Bastard, cannot praise this album enough. It's not exactly the easiest listen, but it gets you accustomed to Tyler's very visual, intense style very quickly. And I do stress the word intense because rape and murder are very common lyrical themes on this album. I've always kind of looked at it as almost like watching Clockwork Orange, like the way that these horrible things are happening right in front of you, but it's presented in such a gritty, ridiculous way that you kind of can't help but watch to see what happens. It's not a very easy album to get through, but the very gritty, lo-fi, and synth-heavy beats that Tyler produced almost all by himself made him sound like the damn near Antichrist. You all know what happened next. Tyler took off, he released Goblin, and ever since, he's been sort of a figurehead of this underground rap culture. But while I kind of jumped on the bandwagon at the time, to be honest, I don't think Goblin has aged particularly well. While it was kind of fresh and interesting, while it was hard to stomach on Bastard, I feel like a lot of the stuff on Goblin, while there is plenty of good stuff on here still, most of it was done just for shock value. On the other hand, his next album, Wolf, was completely the opposite. And honestly, like the real start of his coming out party. Like, this was still a very gritty, very intense, in-your-face album, but it showed Tyler bringing elements of his softer side. But around the time of Cherry Bomb, I honest to God felt like I completely fell off with Tyler, and he completely fell off, like the deep end. This was a vanity project in every way, which on paper, sometimes works, but it also doesn't work a lot of times. This was just plain bad overall, so much so that I wanted nothing to do with Tyler the Creator for a while. But Tyler redeemed himself in 2017 with, on paper, his best album to date, Flower Boy. Like, from shocking confessions to an unbearably emotional tone, if you told me that this was the same guy fantasizing about rape 6 years ago, I honestly wouldn't have believed you. Now, honestly, I wasn't expecting to hear from Tyler this quickly. I honestly thought he was going to take a little while longer, tour more about Flower Boy, and probably reinvent himself again, but here we are with Igor. Let's chat about it. This album starts off with Igor's theme, and no matter how far we come with Tyler, I always feel like I'm going to get somewhat amped when I hear those eerie synths in the background. Now, the first thing you're going to realize here, there is a strong funk, and it is seriously real. Not to mention, I freaking love the samples and the multiple layers to everything. It's funny, when I first heard this track, I did think that maybe Tyler was going back towards his, evil roots deep down, but then I heard Lil Uzi Vert's very carefree verse on this track, and I just can't help but be happy listening to this now. It's laid back and all, but it's also strangely heartbroken. And while this is just a glorified introduction, I feel like you can just pick up so much about this album right from this opening track. In 2019, Tyler has become completely fearless. Not to mention, he has evolved once again, and it's pretty incredible. Now, you have to realize Flower Boy was a big leap for Tyler, but this is completely different of an album. Take, for example, one of the lead singles, EARFQUAKE. Like, the lo-fi production here is a little hard to wrap your head around. But things only get stranger as it goes on, especially when Tyler brings in his heavy effect-drenched vocals. And we get this pretty strong hook here of "Don't Leave, It's My Fault." It honestly just very quickly becomes a very heartbroken album. It's a bizarre track, and if you haven't listened to Tyler in a while, this is certainly going to take some getting used to. But I continue to just love this earthquaking clash of styles, no pun intended. And just hearing Tyler get so much more comfortable with his vocals just makes me so damn happy. A Boy Is a Gun later on is strange ground even for Tyler at this point. I absolutely love the freakish samples here, and Tyler's verse here is one of his most confident. All the gun references and lyrics here actually make this one of the more hard to listen to tracks as well. And I mean that, you really feel the pain of a breakup on this track, and it's really intense. It just adds a lot of levity to this entire album. Now, Puppet actually took a little while to grow on me. Tyler here seems a whole lot more frantic, and at first I wasn't into that as much. But now that I've had a lot of times to listen to this album, this track has finally grown on me. Some of the samples here, I feel like I would have heard out of the Madlib or J Dilla playbook back in the day. And Tyler, in his performance here, comes off next level. He just sounds so defeated, so unapologetically heartbroken. And Kanye's short but effective verse here just adds enough of an edge to this track. It reminds you that it's a hip-hop album at the end of the day. And by the end of this track, it kind of morphs into this psychedelic romp that turns out to be both dreamy and carefree, as well as really depressing and sad. It's pretty stunning. Later on Gone Gone, Thank You. Once again, I freaking love the sampling. That's something that Tyler's only gotten better at. Like, I can't stress this enough. This is a very strange, freaky album, very telling of its album art. It obviously has that very romantic, sappy feel to a lot of tracks, but it's also very ugly underneath, very freakish. Hell, even inhuman. But more often than not, I end up completely falling for it. Tyler just has really got a connection with the fans at this point. I love the upbeat vibe here and just how Tyler takes his time coming into this track, and by the time his verse really gets going, it's something different entirely. Not to mention, after the explosion that was the track What's Good, this is a much more peaceful track overall. Hell, Tyler even references that in the lyrics. Even the extended instrumental finale is really pleasant on the ears. Now, there are a handful of tracks on here as well that are much more rap-centric for all you old-school Tyler fans. Take, for example, I Think. And I can't stress that enough. Like, this might be a lighter album from Tyler, but it certainly has an edge to it still. I Think is a fascinating tune. Like, this is still a very funk-centered track, but Tyler has updated his flow just enough to make it really stand out here. It ends up being this really sweet, charming track about a budding romance. And it really carries over the themes of this album wonderfully, honestly. Not to mention, I feel like I should absolutely stress this because it's a huge factor here. Ever since, like, the Goblin days, or at least the Wolf days, Tyler's made it very clear that Pharrell Williams and Nerd have been a huge influence on him. And it's obviously been there in his music, but never before has it come off more apparent than it does on Igor. Not to mention, the bombastic production just continues to be a huge selling point. As a matter of fact, I'd even go as far as to say that I feel like this is what he had in mind when he made Cherry Bomb years ago. And dare I say, Solange's backing vocals here are more interesting and captivating than anything she did on her own album from this year. New Magic Wand is one of the more fascinating tracks here. The production here is so much grislier and uglier. But in this very heartbroken album, this is like one of the most angry tracks of the bunch. We get some of Tyler's harshest vocals yet, which are pinpointed in between these pleas of not to leave. It's just really powerful. And the final frantic moments here, like this track from start to finish, is just eye-opening. Now, there are a few tracks here that I do feel are a little too middle of the road for Tyler. Running Out of Time, to me, like, I get what he was going for, but it might be a little bit too airy and dreamy for me. Like, I think the hook just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy, and I want to love this track so much. But as far as the verses go here, this is one of the tamest tunes here. Tyler ends up, like, balancing that really nicely with some of his more emotional lyrics here, but I just don't feel like all of his vocal effects work out to his advantage. However, I can't completely hate this track. The production is still brilliant, and the synth solo is really nice. What's Good is probably my least favorite track of the bunch. Honestly, it's one of the more upfront tunes here, and for like old school Tyler fans, this may be your track of the album. At first, I was totally into this, mostly just because Tyler just sounds hungry as hell. But I don't know, I just kind of feel like this track sort of sticks out like a sore thumb. The second half of this track actually leads to some of Tyler's best one-liners here, but I'm just not the biggest fan of this one overall, especially when you look at how genuinely fascinating a lot of this album really is. I Don't Love You Anymore late in the album is one of the freaking weirdest tracks here, which is saying something. Like, some of the effect-drenched vocals are truly out there. But it's in this moment that, like, I kind of realize why I can't enjoy this as much as I did Flower Boy. I honestly feel like this album is a little bit too straightforward in a couple of points. Not stylistically, that's for damn sure. This album packs a punch as far as that goes. But I feel it's like the message. Like, I feel like a lot of times this may be a little bit too in your face. Like, I had to dig a little bit with Flower Boy, and the results, like, kept me happy for years. Production-wise, instrumentals-wise, this album is amazing. But it's tracks like this that I just feel are a little too cut and dry. But Tyler ends this off in a big way with Are We Still Friends? This track is just so funky, so soulful, I really can't say no if I tried. I love just how gigantic the synths are here, and some of Tyler's vocals are honestly some of his most emotional here. Not to mention, it's very sweet, very tender, like you could tell that this one really meant a whole lot to Tyler. Not to mention, I feel like it just wraps up almost every theme that he's brought in on this album up in a really cohesive way. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to answer the big Igor versus Flower Boy debate. I don't think this album is as impactful or nearly as perfect as the Flower Boy album of a couple of years ago. However, that's not really a bad thing. I don't think Tyler really needed to put out another Flower Boy album. The fact of the matter is, in 2019, he has evolved his sound once again and perfected it. He's taken things like funk and soul and wrapped it into his music in a big way, all the while getting more comfortable talking about his feelings, even more so than a few years ago, bringing in exciting samples and perfecting his vocals to the point where he's never sounded this good. Still, really fantastic album from Tyler. I still think Flower Boy's a little bit better, but this is just another example of why he's one of the most creative MCs in the world right now, and I still think it needs to be heard. I'm feeling like a light 8 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what you guys would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.